the white supremacy system, the white supremacy mindset, and the AIDS holocaust. Medicine, if it means anything at all, means to ascertain the fundamental causation of disease. Ultimately, the fundamental cause of a given disease determines what must be done about it. Otherwise, one is treating various symptoms of a disease. Sometimes a disease may be a symptom of something else. AIDS is recognized as a disease, but AIDS also may be a symptom of yet another disease, which must be determined. In relationship to the present pandemic caused by the AIDS virus, 4 questions must be raised and answered if at all possible. 1. Could a government, a specific power entity, cause such a phenomenon as the present AIDS pandemic, in which 75 million plus deaths have been projected? 2. Would any government cause such a phenomenon, and why? 3. Are there any precedents of a government causing such massive levels of deaths? 4. If indeed there is a precedent, what are the parallels between that precedent and the present AIDS phenomenon? Raoul Hilberg's Anti-Destruction of the European Jews provides insight into both the Jewish Holocaust and the AIDS pandemic. As time passes on, the destruction of the European Jews will recede into the background. Its most immediate consequences are almost over, and whatever developments may henceforth be traced to the catastrophe will be consequences of consequences, more and more remote. Already the Nazi outburst has become historical. But this is a strange page in history. Few events of modern times were so filled with unpredicted action and unsuspected death. A primordial impulse had suddenly surfaced among the Western nations. It had been unfettered through their machines. From this moment, fundamental assumptions about our civilization have no longer stood unchallenged, for while the occurrence is past, the phenomenon remains. Before the emergence of the 20th century and its technology, a destructive mind could not play in fantasy with the thoughts that the Nazis were able to translate into action. The administrator of earlier centuries did not have the tools. He did not possess the network of communications. He did not dispose over rapid small arms fire and quick-working poison gases. The bureaucrat of tomorrow would not have these problems. Already he is better equipped than the German Nazis were. Killing is not as difficult as it used to be. The modern administrative apparatus has facilities for rapid concerted movements and for efficient massive killings. These devices not only trap a larger number of victims, they also require a greater degree of specialization. And with that division of labor, the moral burden too is fragmented among the participants. The perpetrators can now kill his victims without touching them, without hearing them, without seeing them. He may feel sure of his success and safe from his repercussions. This ever-growing capacity for destruction cannot be arrested anywhere. We saw how the Nazis had built upon the experiences of the past. Now there are means which will allow still others to seize upon the Nazis' experience, so that it in turn may yet become a precedent for the future. In the words of President Truman, Hitler's persecution of the Jews did much to awaken Americans to the dangerous extremes to which prejudice can be carried if allowed to control government actions. With uncommon perception, the president saw that the retention in mid-20th century of discriminatory barriers signified the maintenance of a springboard and the preservation of a target for destruction. The New York Times editorial reviewing "And the Band Played On" by Randy Schiltz states, "And the band played on applies withering hindsight to society's shortcomings, almost none to its successes. It overlooks the scientific feat of identifying the AIDS virus and developing an antibody test, achieved in record time. It gives no credit to the equally striking social achievements. Most Americans have so far refused to panic in the face of a terrifying disease or to oppress the barely tolerated minorities that are its focus." In another article, the New York Times reported, Geneva, November 14th, the World Health Organization has raised its estimates of AIDS cases throughout the world by 50% and says finding a vaccine may take longer than experts thought. Halfdan Mahler, the organization's Director General, painted a bleak picture at the start of the conference on acquired immune deficiency syndrome, which destroys the body's ability to fend off disease and is always fatal. "My scientific sources tell me that a vaccine may be even further away than we thought a year ago, and development of therapeutic agents has been frustratingly slow," he said. Mr. Mahler said, "Available evidence indicates that the virus is continuing to spread and the number of AIDS cases climbs steadily. The health agency estimates that 5 to 10 million people in the world are carriers of the human immunodeficiency virus, which caused AIDS but have not as yet developed the disease. If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you think you understand will only confuse you. Neely Fuller Jr., The United Compensatory Code System Concept. In the size of the lie, there is always contained a certain factor of credibility, since the great masses of people will more easily fall victim to a great lie than to a small one, since they themselves lie. Sometimes in little things, thus such an untruth will not at all enter their heads, Therefore, just for this reason, some part of the most impudent lie will remain and stick. Robert G. L. Waite, The Psychopathic God. Adolf Hitler. What's past is prologue. William Shakespeare. George Santayana, the American philosopher, has left to posterity the challenge. Those who do not know history and do not learn from history will repeat it. From the aforementioned information, I conclude the following. If you attempt to understand biological and chemical warfare without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused. If you attempt to understand the killing of gypsies in Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused. If you attempt to understand the killing of homosexuals in Germany under the leadership of Adolf Hitler without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused. If you attempt to understand the Holocaust of Semites of the Jewish religion in Europe from 1933 to 1945, wherein 6 million Semites were slaughtered under conditions of mass deceit with the awareness of other Western powers, without understanding white supremacy, you will only be bewildered and totally confused. Anyone who has not mastered an understanding of Germany under Adolf Hitler's leadership and the Holocaust of Semites cannot possibly understand the AIDS Holocaust of 1980 to 1991, wherein 50 million to 75 million deaths of black people on the continent of Africa and elsewhere have been planned and projected. If you attempt to understand the AIDS Holocaust without understanding white supremacy, you will only be confused and you may be dead. The word Holocaust is defined in this paper as the massive, planned slaughtering under conditions of major deception of people classified as non-white, conducted by people who classify themselves as white, for the specific purpose of depopulation of non-white people, under the specific conditions of white supremacy domination. All information, events, and data that are not placed in proper context or do not establish precise relationships are only nonsense. Nonsense, because it deceives and causes confusion, can be used for deadly purposes. Much of the discussion heretofore about AIDS and much of the information that has appeared in the electronic and print media about AIDS are experienced as largely nonsensical to increasing numbers of people, especially black people, including those in the U.S., which thus far has the largest number of documented cases of AIDS, but also in Africa, which has the largest number of projected deaths. Most disturbing and most nonsensical is the obsessive insistence on the part of people who classify themselves as white that black people in Africa caused the spread of the AIDS virus throughout the world from their contact with the African green monkey. My effort, therefore, is to place the discussion of AIDS in what I consider to be its only proper and logical context. I am attempting to neutralize much of the nonsense that has developed worldwide concerning this topic in the past 5 or so years. AIDS is a deadly disease which, after its sudden appearance, has already killed thousands of people. The projection is that it will kill many, many thousands more, indeed many millions. I hope that by cutting through the nonsense surrounding the discussion of AIDS and taking a more logical approach to the epidemic disease, many lives throughout the world will be saved. From 1933 to 1945, Germany, a leading country in Western civilization under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, with the assistance of politicians, doctors, lawyers, professors, judges, scientists, and the general population, conducted open warfare against and planned the extermination of Semites of the Jewish religion who were citizens of Germany and other countries of German-occupied Europe. As persons who were referred to in Germany and throughout Europe as Semites, the Jews were not considered to be white people or Aryans. As Semites, they were considered to have their genetic roots amongst Africans, black people on the continent of Africa. Indeed, the word Semite is derived from the Latin prefix semi, which means half. Semites were the products of the genetic mixture produced when white Greek and Roman soldiers invaded Africa and raped African women who, of course, were black. Semite means the same as mulatto. Thus, they were considered to be half black and half white, or colored people. Thus, a yellow-colored star was placed on their outer clothing by the German government in the Hitler era. The terms anti-Semite and anti-Semitism most fundamentally refer to a destructive ideological, psychological, and behavioral state of anti-color waged by people who classify themselves as white against those who are classified as non-white, even when those non-whites have lost much of their skin coloration in some instances. Semites who left Africa and eventually attempted to settle in Europe miscegenated further with white-skinned people on the continent of Europe and continued to lose much of their melanin skin pigmentation. However, because of the dominant character of the African genotype, including hair texture and type and facial features, there continued to exist evidence of African genetic heritage. Because of the dominance of African or Black genetic heritage, genetically recessive white-skinned people of Europe continued to fear the possibility of white genetic annihilation caused by the Semites. Thus, there was a 2,000-year history of white hostility towards Semites, or coloreds, of the Jewish religion on the continent of Europe, in spite of short periods in which the hostility of whites towards the Semites was less intense. Following Germany's loss of World War I and the major decline of the German economy, which caused a sense of extreme and profound dislocation and vulnerability amongst the German people, latent hostility began to escalate towards the Semites. Again, these people were long recognized as being able to cause white genetic annihilation because they carried the dominant Black genetic material from Africa, although it had been much diluted over a 2,000-year period. It should be noted that the most fundamental of all vulnerabilities is white genetic vulnerability, or the fear of white annihilation. Hostility against the Semites intensified even though the Semites sought to identify with and be accepted as white people. They wanted to be Germans or other Europeans, but they were told they were Semites, even if one of their parents was white or even if they were married to whites. Hostility also was directed against gypsies, who were also darker-skinned people, and whose very name means out of Egypt. In addition, hostility was directed against homosexuals because, in the logic of Adolf Hitler and other white supremacists, homosexuals represented weakness on the part of the white male, who already was feeling vulnerable. Adolf Hitler, who came to power in Germany in 1933, became the most forceful articulator of that most fundamental of all fears of the global and local white collective, the fear of white genetic annihilation caused by people classified as non-white. Indeed, it can be said that Adolf Hitler was the highest crystallization of the white supremacy mindset based upon the fear of white genetic annihilation and its companion thought, white genetic survival by any necessary and conceivable means. Hitler, because he tapped into the deepest fear, was able to have the support and sympathy of masses of other people who, like himself, classified themselves as white, then and now. They understood Hitler's call, at conscious as well as deep subconscious levels, for white genetic survival. This is the perceived threat that the Semites of the Jewish religion residing in Europe represented to Germans and other Europeans. Hitler and his followers referred to the Semites as Untermensch. Amongst many other horrendous accusations, Hitler accused them of carrying and causing disease. Indeed, he referred to the Semites as being viruses. From the book The Psychopathic God, Adolf Hitler, by Robert G. L. Waite, I quote, "Toward the end of February 1942, just after the Wannsee Conference, which organized the final solution to the Jewish problem, Hitler listed himself among the great benefactors of mankind who had isolated dangerous disease germs. The discovery of the Jewish virus is one of the greatest revolutions that has ever taken place. The fight we are carrying on is of the same nature as that waged by Pasteur and Koch during the last century. How many diseases have their origin in the Jewish virus? We shall retain our health when we eliminate the Jew." Hitler further accused the government that preceded his own, the Weimar Republic, of surrendering the German nation to civilization by Jews and Negroes. And thus, in Hitler's pattern of perception and logic, he planned for the extermination of the Semites as the final solution to the problem of white genetic survival, by getting rid of the source of white genetic annihilation. Through a monstrous pattern of lying and deceit, promoting the big lie through a very sophisticated government propaganda apparatus, it was propagated that the Semites were the source of all of the problems that threatened the German and European peoples. Thus, mass-level destruction was planned against the Semites. This process was participated in by all levels of the German and European societies. Adolf Hitler's leadership of Germany from 1933 to 1945 in the war against the Semites has become the standard for the ultimate conduct of governmental and state white supremacy. In 1932, the year before Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, in Tuskegee, Alabama, USA, another destruction was being conducted against people who were classified as non-white by people who classified themselves as white doctors, scientists, and government officials. This planned destruction was the Tuskegee syphilis study. From 1932 to 1972, a total of 40 years, United States Public Health, Macon County Health Department, Tuskegee Institute, Veterans Hospital, in Tuskegee and private physicians in and around Macon County deliberately planned to withhold treatment from more than 400 black men who were suffering from syphilis. It was verbalized that the program would be a means for getting rid of the black people in the U.S. Very shortly thereafter, the disease which we now refer to as AIDS began to surface in the U.S. The populations focused upon as being infected with the AIDS virus were first the white male homosexuals and subsequently black and Hispanic people. More specifically, the projected source of the virus was said to be African people who had been bitten by the African green monkey or the vervet monkey. In 1969, a book entitled A Survey of Chemical and Biological Warfare by John Cookson and Judith Nottingham was published by the monthly review Cress. The book is described on its cover as follows: derived from a 3-year study conducted by a British biochemist and geneticist and a British political scientist, the text affords a comprehensive review of materials used and policies adopted by authorities in the U.S., Canada, Great Britain, and West Germany. It also states that it provides one of the most comprehensive views on the subject of chemical and biological warfare written for the layman. The authors, who are well qualified, produced a vast amount of documentation of the use and research on these types of weapons. On p. 322, at the bottom of the page, the authors state, "The question of whether new diseases could be used is of considerable interest. Vervet monkey disease may well be an example of a whole new class of disease-causing organisms. Handling of blood and tissue without precaution causes infection. It is unaffected by any antibiotic substance so far tried and is unrelated to any other organism. It causes fatality in some cases and can be generally transmitted in man. In the words of Dr. C.E. Gordon Smith, it has possible potential as an infectious disease of man. It presumably is also of BW interest. New diseases are continually appearing. In addition to these, there are the possibilities of virus and bacteria being genetically manipulated to produce new organism." On p. 110 in the same book they state, "Just recently a great deal of useful work has been done on the vervet monkey disease, which caused 7 deaths in Germany. Reports of progress were sent to 40 laboratories all over the world. 9 of these have been supplied with infective material and/or antisera, 4 in the USA and 1 each in Germany. Panama, South Africa, Uganda, and the USSR. A non-infective complement-fixing antigen has been prepared to the WHO reference laboratories." In Hansard, May 1968. In another book, A Higher Form of Killing by Robert Harris and Jeremy Paxman, published by Hill and Wang, on p. 219, the authors state, the claims continued. In January 1978, a correspondent with Reuters news agency reported from NATO headquarters that scientific experts had informed him that the Russians were developing 3 horrific new diseases for warfare, Lassa fever, which according to the sources kills 35 out of every 100 people it strikes, Ebola fever, which kills 70 out of every 100, and the deadly Marburg fever. Over and over again, the name African green monkey shows up. This is not a monkey biting Africans and causing disease, but a weapon of biological warfare developed in laboratories by people who classify themselves as white. This charge, however, is denied, and blame is projected onto African people. Adolf Hitler propagated his big lie against the Semites of the Jewish religion, which became his pretext for the planned slaughter of 11 million. He actually succeeded in killing 6 million, all in the name of white supremacy for the express purpose of white genetic survival. In the late 1980s, there has been grave concern throughout the world that the white birth rate is declining as the birth rates of all non-white people continue to increase. It is at this time that we witness the sudden appearance of AIDS, primarily affecting black people in Africa and Haiti. As truth always surfaces, In time, we will know the full details of the massive deception of the AIDS Holocaust when the current big lie is unveiled.